Lots of YouTubers are talking about the Panasonic S5 and the S5 Mark II firmware update that came out yesterday morning officially. I guess there was an embargo that got lifted a few weeks ago and a whole bunch of videos about this came out. And because I'm not like a super influencer, I don't have access to pre-embargo firmware, but I decided let's test it. But we're not testing the crazy stabilization, pre-burst shooting, frame IO. They're cool features, but the thing that's interesting to me is the human detect autofocus, because as long as I've had this camera, it hasn't been totally perfect. In the release notes, they do state that the firmware makes human detect a lot better. So we're gonna put that to the test. And to kick this off, we're actually gonna start with something a little bit different, something really cool that this camera does that not a lot of people are aware of. By the way, if I mentioned the firmware that came out this morning, that's because I shot the video yesterday thinking I would get it done and not realizing how much in-depth testing I had to do. So, whatever. Let's go to the first test. The Panasonic S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX have a very interesting ability. If you own a DJI RS3 series of gimbal and you connect the USB-C cable from the gimbal to the camera, it should follow you, right? So it actually uses the autofocus out of the S5II. It uses that data to tell the gimbal where to go. So currently, this is the latest firmware on the S5 Mark II that came out this morning. And we're on the gimbal, we're in face eye detect. So let's see how well this works. I just need to pull the trigger. Sorry, I need to put myself in frame where I want to be. Pull the trigger, and okay, it seems to be following me. And it's doing a fairly good job, but it lost me. Okay, so let's try this again, but this time let's turn on the body tracking as well, and let's see if it holds up any better. We've set the autofocus now to eye face body, and let's see if it holds up any better. So again, get myself in the frame where I want to be, pull the trigger, and it seems to be following me fairly well. It actually looks like it's doing a much better job. Let's try to fool it. Yeah, it seems to be holding up. Now, we all love balancing gimbals, and for the channel, I've decided to pull out the other S5 Mark II. This one has the older firmware on it. So let's see if this firmware update from Panasonic actually improved the ability of the tracking on the camera. And let me just be clear that this isn't necessarily as good as having a Raven eye for the camera. Like, I'm standing stationary and the camera's moving around. I can actually see the framing, it's moving around. So it's not perfect. It is kind of a cool parlor trick in a pinch. But here, let's balance this thing on the gimbal and see if this firmware actually improved things. It's still moving. This is the previous firmware for the S5 Mark II. And right now we're in Face Eye Auto Detect, and I'm gonna pull the trigger and let's see if the RS3 will follow me properly. Okay, so this is, oh, look at that. It completely lost me. For a sanity check, here, let's actually go back. Okay, so we're back here. We're gonna pull the trigger again. And if I go this way, yep, it completely lost me. Apparently, I'm in the corner of this room. Okay, it goes without saying that Face Eye was a complete fail on the old firmware, so there's definitely an improvement already with the new firmware. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better. So let's pull the trigger, and this is now the body detection, right? So if I go this way, it seems like it's holding up like the other camera. Okay, so face and eye detect seems to have been improved. And from the looks of that last test, it was improved quite a bit. Okay, a little while ago, I did a review of the Panasonic S5 Mark II, and I had a shot very similar to this, but the camera fully failed me. Take a look. And to be clear, this problem is not exclusive to the Panasonic S5 Mark II. Matter of fact, if you buy any mirrorless camera system, you're gonna run into the same problem. So right now, I'm wearing a DJI wireless mic. Here's the thing, right now, on your left, you're seeing the firmware 2.5, and on the right is the new 3.0 that was released this morning. And we're in face eye mode, and I'm not sure which one's better right now. If I had to guess, it's gonna be firmware 3.0. Also, I didn't put NDs on these lenses, so it's the same kit lens, 20 to 60 on both lenses. We are all the way down at a 320 ISO, and because I don't have two sets of ND filters, I wanted to keep this really fair. So my shutter speed is cranked all the way up. So the shutter angle, I think, is like 10 degrees or something crazy like that. But again, this is face eye. So I'm gonna guess that 3.0 is doing better, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch it to face eye body and see how that does with the same shot. Interestingly, on the 2.5 revision of the firmware, this mode is called human detect, where on the 3.0 version, it is called face eye body detect. Now, if I had to guess, again, I'm not in front of the computer to check the results, but based on what I saw with the DJI gimbal, I'm gonna guess that 3.0, which is on your right again, that one is performing better. I'm guessing. I could be totally wrong. So let's do another test here. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna match settings and we're gonna throw on, first we're gonna throw on a Sigma 14 to 24. I don't have an ND for that one with me anyway. We're gonna check firmware 2.5, then we're gonna check firmware 3. We're gonna throw a Sigma APS-C 16mm 1.4 with an ND, see how that performs. And then we have the Lumix 18mm prime lens, full frame 1.8. And we'll throw that on both firmware and see how that performs. Is it firmware or firmwares? I don't know, I'm confused. Like how I'm confused on which camera I'm supposed to be looking at. Okay, so I'm back in front of the computer and I've had a chance to review the footage and it's far from conclusive. This is pretty interesting. So we did a bunch of different lens combos and I noticed something in this very first shot, right? So the 20 to 60 kit lens looked a certain way, but check this out. So this is the Sigma 14 to 24 at f2.8, wide open, ISO 320, shutter angle at 10 degrees because I didn't have an ND on it. And this is just face and eye detect, right? So if I go through the clip, you'll notice it's not great. It gets about there. I'm still fairly out of focus. And then eventually I get in the focus. Okay. So now if we go to the face eye body detect on the same firmware, let's take a look here. So if I play it, I'm out of focus, 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 and it looks like I'm in focus now. Okay. Now on the old firmware, I would say that face eye body detect seems to work a lot better. So let's move over to firmware 3.0 on the same lens. So this is just face eye detect. And again, I'm out of focus right now. Still out of focus, still out of focus. And here I am. Moving to face eye body detect. Still out of focus, still out of focus, still out of focus. No pulsing, which is nice. And there we go, we're in focus. So I'm gonna say that with both firmware, that the face eye body detect seems to do really well when you're at a very high shutter speed. I had a feeling this would happen with the shutter speed because the shutter speed, if it's all the way up, well, in this case at 10 degrees, which is like cranking the shutter speed to the max, you're not gonna have any motion blur in the shot and it makes it easier for the camera to figure out what's what. So I'm not totally surprised by this result, that they acted virtually identical between the two firmware versions. But let's move over to the Sigma 16mm 1.4 wide open with an ND, so I could actually go to 180 degree shutter. So this is an APS-C crop, but here, let's take a look at that. Okay, so looking at this image, right, this is 2.4, and it looks pretty good. It's focusing on me pretty well. Not terrible. Again, face eye detect only. Moving on to face eye body detect. So if we watch the scene and we look at my face, yeah, I'm in focus now and it's holding. So again, this kind of supports the theory that face eye body is the better mode. On to the latest firmware in face eye detect only. So we're walking up and my face is completely out of focus right now. Still out of focus, still out of focus. Still out of focus. That is not great. And there we go. It snaps into focus right there. And it kind of pulsed in and out there for a second. It's got me thinking that third-party lenses aren't amazing with this firmware update. But here, let's go to the face eye body detect clip. Take a look at that. All right, in face eye body, it looks like I'm a little more in focus. Still in focus, still in focus. Yeah, it seems to acquire focus a lot faster. Still pulses a little bit. Just from the two Sigma lenses that we've checked, I think I've thoroughly concluded that third-party lenses are not amazing with this firmware. So we got one more lens to try. This is a native Lumix lens. It's a Panasonic 18mm 1.8 full frame lens. So let's see how that performs between the two firmware revisions. Starting off with the old firmware, again, native glass, and I look very in focus, and I'm wide open. ISO 320, shutter angle is at 180 because we're using an ND filter. It's hunting a little bit, but not nearly as bad as the Sigma was. Moving over to Face Eye Body Detect. Let's take a look here. So I'm walking up. I'm out of focus at the moment. Not terribly, though. Let's see when it picks me up. Okay, it looks like it's got me. And let's see how smooth the focus continues. It's doing very well. So right away on the old firmware, we're seeing a massive difference in the way that it acquires focus and holds focus. So let's see what happens on the latest firmware revision. Okay, on firmware 3, we have, again, same camera settings essentially. And I'm walking towards the camera, face eye only. It's not pulsing, but it's not great. Like, I'm still there. I finally got in focus there. And it doesn't pulse as I get closer, so that's fairly promising, but not great. And finally, firmware 3.0, face eye body detect. Now, as I watch this, I look fairly in focus. Yeah, that is performing a lot better than the face eye only. According to the Gimbal, when we did that test, 3.0 was better in face eye, but if I'm going to be honest, I feel like I'm going to be using face eye body detect more often than I'm going to be using face eye only, regardless of which firmware. I didn't see any notable crazy difference, unlike what Panasonic mentioned when they released the firmware release notes for this update. So I got nothing. I don't know. That was fairly extensive. I mean, I didn't see a major difference jumping between the lenses, with the exception of the native glass. It performed a little bit better, but that's to be expected. If you did the update, let me know in the comments below. In my Panasonic S5II review, I did a test which was admittedly a little embarrassing, but I simulated the idea of being in a dark venue like a nightclub. Here, take a look at that footage. Anyway, we got the teal and orange lights here, and if I do the nightclub thing, you'll notice the autofocus box is struggling, right? And if I go like full out 90s dance party, what the hell am I doing? See, I'm moving back and forth, and our autofocus box is going a little crazy. Now that we're on firmware 3, let's reconduct the test. So we've got orange, we've got teal, again, cinematic, sure. And currently the camera is set to face and eye detect, okay? So using the Amaran app, we are gonna disable this light. And you'll notice that the box has disappeared off my head, so it's not tracking me. And here are the lights. We're gonna go back and forth, and it's holding, but it's like losing me. It's not the greatest in terms of me doing Vogue with lights. Let me turn this back on for a moment. Now, something interesting to note, let's switch this to face eye body detection and see what happens. In human face eye body detection, watch this. We're gonna kill the light again. And the box is tracking me. I'm at 640 ISO. This room at the moment does not have any lighting besides my Amaranth. You know what, here, for the purposes of this, let's actually shut these off. Okay, so those are off. We're still getting really good tracking. That's impressive. So let's see if it trips out when I turn on these. And we're gonna go back and forth. So if I had to give a review that wasn't music video based, let me turn these off again. I think the go-to mode when you're tracking humans is face, eye, body. The face, eye is good, but even like with the RS3, even with this low light test, it seems to perform very well. And due to the upgrades of the face, eye, body detection on this camera, I probably would take this to a nightclub and do some recording. Oh, and by the way, this lens that you're looking at right now, it's an 18mm Lumix prime lens. So it's a 1.8. It's all the way open, and it did a very good job with that very challenging lighting condition. In fact, let's look at it again. I'm gonna try to fool it a little bit. It loses me in the corner, but I mean, not terribly. The fact that it's even trying to focus on me in such a challenging condition is seriously impressive. Good job, Panasonic. I have some thoughts about this. If you're not using native lenses, I don't think that this firmware update's gonna make a massive difference in terms of the human detection. I noticed that when I use the 20 to 60 kit lens, or I use the Prime 18 1.8, that the performance was very, very good. Apparently on the gimbal, when I was in Face Eye only, it seemed to behave a little bit better, but in terms of Face Eye body, after updating the firmware, I almost don't want to use just Face Eye because I feel like it loses me, especially that low light test that we just did. In conclusion, is it improved? Technically, yes, but I don't think it was enough to hype up the improved autofocus in the S5 Mark II and Mark IIX. If you have the camera and you did this update, let me know in the comments. And also, if you haven't seen it already, I did a review of the Panasonic S5 Mark II, which I did mention during this video. Take a look at that. That'll be linked at the end of the video and in the description. But if you didn't know, my name is Shaun. This has been TechMixr, and I'm out.